The Paradox Pokemon all having basically the same ability is just so boring, especially when there are some layups for hidden abilities staring us in the face. For example, Iron Hands could have Iron Fist. Not only is this extremely fitting because of the similarity of the names, it also works out great for Iron Hands. Thunder Punch is now an upgrade to Wild Charge because they have the same base power, but Thunder Punch doesn't have recoil and has a chance to paralyze. Drain Punch also does a little more damage, meaning that not only is it able to more easily pick up KOs, it also recovers more HP when using it. Importantly, this does not make Quark Drive obsolete. Low Kick or Close Combat sets might still opt to run Quark Drive for an attack boost, and even some punching sets might prefer it because the boost from Quark Drive is 30% compared to Iron Fist 20%. For this video, I'm going to be giving Paradox Pokemon new abilities that they could have in addition to Quark Drive or Photosynthesis. I'm going to avoid using the abilities of their base forms because that is both uninteresting and some of the abilities of the base form do not quite fit the new Paradox forms. Also, for transparency, the channel MapBud made what I assume to be a quite similar video on this topic a few months ago. I haven't watched it and don't plan to until after this video was done to avoid copying what they did, but I thought it should be clear that I'm not the first one to do this. Starting with Great Tusk, the choice is quite simple. Give it Sand Force. This is more or less the same as giving it a new method to activate a Photosynthesis attack boost, as the boosts are the same in power. Hey, I'm editing right now, and when I wrote this and recorded it, I was under the impression that Sand Force gave a 30% base power boost to all moves while in Sandstorm, but it's actually just Rock, Steel, and Ground type moves, so it's not quite as interchangeable as I make it out to be. Just keep that in mind as we go into this next part here. The main difference is that Great Tusk likes the sand more than it likes the sun. The fire and grass types that benefit the most from sun tend to skew special, which makes them decently bad matchups for Tusk, even if it does deal super effective damage into fire types. Compare this to Sand, where it has great offensive matchups into Rock and Steel types and does well defensively because Rock, Steel, and Ground types tend to lean physical. In competitive, Great Tusk probably needs a slightly stronger ability because it's a good but not great Pokemon. This video is going to be VGC centric. I know it's good at singles, but I thought Sandforce was pretty fitting for it and also pretty decent. Also, I would like to ask you to subscribe to the channel, trying to hit 2K by the end of the year. Thank you. Screamtail should definitely have an ability which interacts with sound moves. There's going to be a lot of examples where I need to make inferences based on the Pokemon's name and design because the games don't give us much of anything regarding lore on these Pokemon. Punk Rock and Liquid Voice definitely don't make sense on it, so our only real choice is Soundproof. This works out because not only is it fitting thematically, Screamtail also appreciates the defensive benefits of being immune to Hyper Voice, Snarl, Parting Shot, and Parashot. Screamtail is a pretty okay Pokemon, and a lot of its success comes from the incredible special bulk it provides with Photosynthesis. So Soundproof would only be used for help with very particular matchups, but I'm sure it would see used in some cases, especially if it's on a team with other Paradox Pokemon that would prefer the booster energy. Brute Bonnet, who thrives on Koraidon teams due to its incredible bulk, would get another way to allow it to stick around in the sun. Harvest. This would give it access to recovery that it lacks over its main competition on Moongiz, but because the defense boosts in the sun are so valuable, it wouldn't completely box out Photosynthesis either. Also, in order to take advantage of this, Brute Bonnet is basically forced to run Citrus Berry when there are plenty of other Pokemon that would like to have Citrus Berry, and sometimes it just prefers to run other items. For example, James Evans' second place Brute Bonnet ran Covert Cloak. One of the only ways to beat Harvest is with Knockoff, and because Bonnet is a bulky dark type, that means the opposing team needs to invest a turn doing very little damage into it, which can allow you to get a crucial Spore off. Harvest would be a very strong ability that makes Brute Bonnet a wall that is very difficult to break through, but in a slightly different way than it is now. For Flutter Mane, I was stuck between Shadow Tag and Sheer Force. Nah, I'm just messing around. Those abilities are far too strong for what is already one of the best Pokemon of all time. I want to give Flutter Mane a defensive ability because something offensive is far too much of a buff for it. Levitate works well, but that's the ability of its base form. After some time, I landed on Cursed Body. It's not great on a Pokemon that fails Flutter Mane, but the only way to give Flutter Mane an ability that would look at over Photosynthesis is to give it an even better ability, which I'm just not going to do for Flutter Mane. Slitherwing is kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, being a Paradox Pokemon that is, well, bad. I guess it's not as clever of a transition as I thought. Slitherwing's ability certainly needs to pull a lot of weight because this Pokemon is trash. Why does it have more special attack than speed? Anyways, Tinted Lens is an ability on a lot of bug types that helps them out a lot because a lot of things resist bug. With it, First Impression would actually be able to do some damage into Pokemon you might not expect it to be able to. There's also Adaptability, which would help this Pokemon out with its otherwise mediocre damage output. Of these two, I lean more towards Tinted Lens because not only does it feel more appropriate, it also helps out more with its matchups into Ghost and Fairy types, which tend to be physically frail. Slitherwing won't be incredible, but not relying on the sun is very beneficial for a bug type. For Sandy Shocks, I think there is one ability that feels pretty fitting, but would also be incredible on it: Earth Eater. Having an immunity to both ground and electric makes Sandy Shocks able to switch in on quite a few relevant Pokemon, including some it would be normally very bad into. I don't feel incredible giving Sandy Shocks a signature ability, but because it's just so bad, I don't feel as terrible about it. Also, because Volt Absorb and Water Absorb are present on so many Pokemon, Earth Eater feels like less of a signature ability and more of a reflavoring of past common abilities. Roaring Moon is one of the strongest Paradox Pokemon, and the ability I found most fitting would only make it stronger. Tough Claws would power up all the moves that Roaring Moon wants to use, most notably Breaking Swipe, Dragon Claw, Acrobatics, and Knockoff. I'm sure I don't need to explain to you why this is a good ability, so the important question is, would this make Photosynthesis completely obsolete? Tough Claws and Photosynthesis give the exact same attack boost, except that Tough Claws is always active and can't be removed by either having the weather change or by switching out. However, I still don't think this is enough to completely usurp Photosynthesis. When we saw Roaring Moon being used, much of the time it was as a Tailwind setter using Speed Booster Terraflying Acrobatic sets. That set can't use Tough Claws to the same effect, so Photosynthesis would not be left in the dust, even if Tough Claws plus Life Orb or Choice Band would be very strong. This is going to be one of the common things you see where I give something that is offensively strong, sometimes giving the same or even a stronger boost as Photosynthesis or Quark Drive, but being able to boost speed or attack depending on what you want to use is just so strong, so it will never be completely overwritten. Walking Wake is a water type that fits extremely well onto a sun team. In fact, its best results have been with Koraidon. If there was an ability like Rocky Payload or Steelworker, but for fire-type moves, I would happily slap that onto it and call it a day, but there isn't, and I'm not going to make up new abilities for this video. Instead, I want to go in the opposite direction and give it a rain mode with Swift Swim. This would essentially make it a Kingdra with better stats, and out of all the Swift Swim users, it would have the highest base stat total aside from Mega Swampert, making it a great option for rain teams. One of the best ways to counter a rain team is by winning the Weather War and getting the sun up. But if you try to do that against Walking Wake, now you're dealing with a Pokemon that has a 4x fire resist and is not impeded by the sun if it uses Hydro Steam, which is a very high obstacle for a sun team to beat. There aren't many Pokemon that can benefit from multiple weathers using the same set, and I think this expands on Walking Wake's niche as a Pokemon which does just that. Gouging Fire is right on the precipice of being a really good Pokemon, with its solid typing and really good stats. Defiant not only fits this Pokemon's furious nature, but also frees it from the shackle of needing to run Clear Amulet and gives it a better item it can run instead, like Life Orb or Choice Band. This Pokemon would be very difficult to stop from setting up with Dragon Dance now that Intimidate only makes it stronger. This is probably the single biggest buff that I have given a Pokemon so far, but that just goes to show how much physical attackers are held back by Intimidate. It's also not impossible to deal with because Burning Bulwark doesn't block statuses like Thunder Wave or Encore. I'm not going to sit around and pretend like this thing isn't incredible and probably a little bit too strong. I might be playing favorites because I want Gouging Fire to do better, but oh well. Raging Bolt needs no favors and probably should get a defensive ability like Fluttermane did, but Berserk feels pretty correct for it. This would probably be the go-to on Life Orb sets or if it were paired with some sort of support Pokemon like Clefairy or Sinistra. Still, some teams might favor the immediacy of a Photosynthesis boost or do not wish to risk their Pokemon playing at 50% HP, so I doubt we'll see Photosynthesis go away entirely. I really like the risk-reward aspect of Berserk on Galarian Moltres, so I think it is interesting here, even if Raging Bolt is probably a little bit too bulky to deserve it. Also, for Walking Wake, Gouging Fire, and Raging Bolt, I also floated the idea of giving them Water Absorb, Flash Fire, and Volt Absorb as a nod to the ability of their base forms before they were all switched to Inner Focus. But I felt this is against the objective of this video, even if it doesn't quite violate the no base form ability rule. Moving on to the future Paradox Pokemon, Iron Treads pairs tremendously well with Motor Drive thematically. But given that putting an electric immunity ability on a ground type feels incredibly redundant from a gameplay perspective, we'll need to go with something else. Giving Iron Treads stamina instead allows it to become an incredibly strong physical wall that can deal with a lot of physical threats. I also thought about giving it to Great Tusk as it does work there, but giving it to Iron Treads reins it in a little bit by not giving it stab on body press. Will this be used over Quark Drive? Probably not, considering that Treads likes to switch in on Miraidon and KO with his speed boost from the electric terrain, but it still helps out in a meta where Miraidon or another electric terrain setter isn't super prevalent. For Iron Bundle, I wanted to make it even more at home in the snow. Iron Bundle has a deceptively high defense stat. You wouldn't expect this thing to be able to take a rock slide, but it definitely can, especially if it's boosted by the snow. Unfortunately, it doesn't have the recovery it needs to really have a defensive snow mode. To help with this, let's give it Ice Body so they can have some recovery. I'm aware that defensive ice types are not historically good, but with this, Bundle would be a fast offensive ice type that just happens to have a lot of tools for his physical defense. I would still expect Quark Drive to be the preferred ability, but I could definitely imagine Snow teams using Bundle to match up well into certain physical threats. Iron Jugulus needs a lot of help. It's a worse version of a Pokemon well past its prime and needs more damage and better defenses. Luckily, there is an ability which does both of those things, Lightning Rod. I know Lightning Rod commonly goes to electric types, but I mean, it's a robot that flies. It's going to attract lightning. Also, I promise this is the only time I'm going to use the "it's a robot" justification, because otherwise we'd get a lot of abilities that are electric or metal based, and that would feel pretty samey and boring. Originally, I was going to give it Wind Rider, but given that raises attack and not special attack, Lightning Rod felt like it filled the same role but was better for the Pokemon. This could also be achieved with Motor Drive, but with this, Iron Jugulus can protect itself and allies from strong electrical attackers, which are relevant to say the least. The boost to special attack is going to help it pick up key KOs, most notable of which is probably that it can OHKO AV Rillaboom at +1 even without Life Orb or Specs. I actually think Iron Jugulus can fit on a lot of rain teams with this ability, where protecting allies from electric attacks is all the more important, and as a bonus, Hurricane can't miss. Speaking of things not missing, Iron Moth is going to get Compound Eyes. With this, it can more reliably use the strong but inaccurate moves in its learned set, like Hurricane, Heat Wave, Overheat, and Fire Blast. I also chose this because Iron Moth does not get any sleep-inducing moves like Sleep Powder, because I don't think a Pokemon with 110 base speed really needs that. I also like the idea of Merciless, as it fits the more monstrous vibe of the Paradox Pokemon. However, Merciless isn't that great or consistent, although it would allow for a pretty fun set of Toxic Spice plus Overheat for guaranteed crits to ignore the special attack drop. I like the consistency that Compound Eyes offers, especially as it communicates an enhanced feature of this Pokemon compared to Volcarona, which works out narratively as this is meant to be a future enhanced version of Volcarona. Iron Thorns is the most straightforward one on this list since Iron Hands. It's going to get Iron Barbs. They're basically synonyms, and while this doesn't help it out as much as I would like, I think just having the pop-up of Iron Thorns, Iron Barbs is silly enough to justify it. If you're not quite satisfied, I understand. So I also propose Clear Body as an ability that is not only stronger for it as a physical attacker, because it prevents Intimidate and speed drops, it's also just generally good on all Pokemon. The problem with Iron Thorns is that even if you gave it a Pokemon-defying ability that was much stronger than either Iron Barbs or Clear Body, like for example, Intimidate or Sandstream, like, Tyranitar has, there's going to be a Pokemon that is a better fit, and it's probably Tyranitar. It doesn't have the tools that Tyranitar does, and even if it did, it doesn't have the stats to compete with Tyranitar, and it's stuck with the debuff of being a physical electric type. Iron Valiant is the only Pokemon in here I will give 2 abilities. Given that it is based on both Gardevoir and Gallade, I wanted to give it an ability from each of those bases. The first ability it will receive is Serene Grace from its Gardevoir side, and the other it will get is Inner Focus from its Gallade side. I understand Inner Focus is the ability of Mega Gallade, which definitely bends the no base form ability rules, but I thought it was pretty good on it, and I couldn't really think of anything better. Serene Grace is a generically good ability that boosts the chance of secondary effects on many moves in its move pool, such as Moonblast or Thunderbolt. Inner Focus is one of the best passive abilities for a physical attacker, preventing both Intimidate and flinches from Fake Out. Importantly, both of these abilities provide value even if Val is run as a mixed attacker. It doesn't feel suboptimal to run Moonblast on an Inner Focus set because you will still get the benefit of being immune to flinching. I could honestly see Inner Focus being used in a lot of cases over Quark Drive, because Inner Focus is just that solid on physical attackers nowadays. For Iron Leaves, the obvious ability is to give it Sharpness, given that it likes to run Leaf Blade and Psy Blade for stab and Sacred Sword for coverage. This would be incredible for it because these moves will start to do crazy high damage, especially Psy Blade if it has that electric terrain boost. The main issue I have with this is that Sharpness could go on this Pokemon as well as Iron Boulder and Iron Crown, because all of their signature moves are boosted by Sharpness. So instead of only giving Iron Leaves Sharpness or giving it to all 3, I'll propose 3 additional abilities they could have in addition to Sharpness, because I do think Sharpness is just the go-to. For Iron Leaves, this is Chlorophyll. Not only are speed boosting abilities very strong, I really like that this allows Iron Leaves to be able to thrive in the field condition meant for the opposite time period Paradox Pokemon, which makes it feel very unique. As an added bonus, on a Sun team, Iron Leaves might be able to actually viably run Solar Blade. I really like when Pokemon are able to pull some of these really unused moves out of the trenches, and I feel like with Iron Leaves, this might actually be able to make it work if the right metagame is present. Moving on to Iron Boulder, Solid Rock seems like a pretty good ability. Rock and Psychic have 7 weaknesses, so it's definitely going to get use out of it. On a sand team with this thing's rock typing and pretty decent special defense, it will be pretty difficult to remove, especially if you support it with things like Intimidate, Friend Guard, or an Assault Vest. Still probably not as strong as Sharpness or Cork Drive just because so many teams value the immediate damage those offer, but I'm always down to help a rock type feel more bulky because the type is just so bad at delivering on that. Last but not least, let's talk about Iron Crown. I was going to give it Filter, but that is effectively the same as Solid Rock, and I'm avoiding repeat abilities a lot here. So I'm going to go in the same direction with a defensive ability, but make it more specific. Heatproof would allow it to mitigate its fire weakness, which is always a pain point for steel types. I actually see a use case for this on Trickern teams with weakness policy next to Lava Plume Torpole, but that is very niche, even if I think it's pretty cool. The biggest help case for this is against Incineroar, because now Flare Blitz does a lot less into it and gives Iron Crown another chance to go for Focus Blast after the first one missed. This is pretty much just worse than Filter, to be clear, and I wish we saw Heatproof on more Pokemon, and honestly saw a Heatproof buff to make things actually Heatproof, because right now it's just a worse version of Well-Baked Body, Flash Fire, and Thick Fat. But I feel like this does something decent with the ability as it exists now. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching this video. I appreciate you making it all the way to this point. If you like this video, you'll probably like another theory crafting video I did where I talk about how to buff bad legendary Pokemon. Also, if you made it to this point in the video, you probably like my channel quite a bit, so I'd appreciate if you like the video and subscribe. That being said, thank you very much for watching. Good luck in your future games and have a good one.